Okay, that looks pretty close to the number of people that it's showing me as participants, so that might be good enough for us to get started. As I mentioned to you, my name is Omar Izzadeen. And I was asked by our beloved Sheikh Atif to present something for everyone today, and the topic that we had agreed on was Ramadan generosity in the time of COVID-19. Uh, in this age of COVID-19 and all the other things that are changing our lives, I think one of the things that is a healthy discussion to be had is how does our current context impact Ramadan? And I think for many of us, the changes and the impact on the way we celebrate Ramadan are quite significant. This is something unprecedented. Certainly, I can't ever think um, in our own history, if I've ever studied of a time uh, where society has required us to celebrate Ramadan uh, essentially from our homes and with very little contact with others. And for many of us, that's a huge adjustment because a great deal of what we do during Ramadan is interact with others and people outside of our homes. And in addition to all of the other adjustments that this pandemic has caused us to make, it's certainly adding to the anxiety and the stress. And my hope today is to engage with all of you in a discussion and in a conversation. Although I cannot hear you, and you may not be able to participate in this conversation in the traditional sense, I I, I do ask that you participate in the chat box. Now I know that you may not be able to see what people are writing in the chat box, and that's okay because mostly the intent is for me to get a sense from you, your level of engagement into this topic and your participation. And in order to enhance that, I encourage you to reach out to somebody in your household, if there is anybody in your household with you at this time, that may be interested in this topic. And just to pull them near and to let them know that at certain points in the presentation today, I'm going to ask you to talk to that person, and then I'm going to ask you to write something in the chat box. And for those of you who are familiar with me, I've been an educator my entire career, and I'm particularly passionate about engagement strategies for students of all ages. Uh, so my hope is in the audience today we have participants of all ages, and regardless of um, what you were expecting out of today, my hope is that you will be able to walk out of here a little bit more engaged than you may typically be in the conversation. I know it sounds like it's a one-way experience, but I very much want this to be more than that. So I appreciate those of you who have already participated by introducing yourselves with a simple greeting in the chat box. So please do continue to do so as you join. And hopefully at this point, you've pulled in someone else to participate along with us so that as we can begin, I can start off with a question for you to consider. So one of the things that I want to first establish is, just off the top of your head, how is Ramadan different now that we are all locked in because of the pandemic? What are some of the most obvious ways that Ramadan is going to be different for us this year? And as I'm speaking, please feel free to respond in the chat box. And as I see responses, I'll repeat them. Um, and as I'm waiting and in between responses, I can give a couple of examples, of course, and how things are changing in my own house and in my own families as well. Um, so once again, the prompt that I'm asking you is discussing with the person next to you. And then responding in the chat box, how is Ramadan different now that we are uh, being asked to stay at home and minimize our interactions with others and leaving our homes? How is Ramadan different for us this year than it may be in previous years? Very good. Saima is here with a good response. She's saying we're not visiting the masjid or the mosque, and that's probably one of the most obvious ones, and in many cases very difficult. AM has responded no tarawih, and I would add that to Saima's response. In other words, we are not praying tarawih in the masjid. Now, of course, many of us are aware that we can pray tarawih at home. In fact, it's a pretty well cited tradition of the Prophet ﷺ to have prayed tarawih in his home as well. So, but I agree that's a significant change because I think for many of us we look forward to praying Taraweeh in the masjid during Ramadan. In fact, growing up, and I think even in my adulthood, and maybe many of you are aware of this as well. Um, there are a number of Muslims, and hopefully this doesn't come as too much of a shock to you. They will fast all day. Uh, they will not tend to their 5 daily prayers, but they will pray Taraweeh in the masjid. And of course, they will pray Eid as well. Um, and I think in many cases, now that that option isn't available, I actually have some degree of concern for members of our community who don't normally tend to their daily prayers, but during Ramadan, they do pray Taraweeh in the masjid. Unfortunately, now that that's not available, certainly that becomes a challenge for us to address. Um, and then, of course, one of the other things written in the chat box here is that we're staying home. That's the biggest difference. And that typically during Ramadan, we are out and about and we are busy with other things that can tend to occupy our time. I have another response here. We're missing the khutbahs that are often delivered in person, of course, in the masjid as well, and not seeing all of the faces that we typically only see at the masjid, either during Taraweeh prayers or Jummah prayers. And I think that's certainly a big difference. And I think for many of us, Ramadan comes around in the same way that weddings or funerals come around, and that you see people that you typically don't see on a regular basis. You probably don't have their phone number, you don't follow them on Facebook, but you see them in person um, at the masjid, and it either happens on Jummah, or it happens during Taraweeh, or it happens, at some of these other big events that bring us together. And unfortunately, now that all of those things are not there, I think this has created a very different feeling to the. Very good. For those of you who are just joining us, because I notice we have a few more people, what I've asked of those of you participating with us today is that you pull somebody next to you that's at your house, if there is anybody in your house that may be interested in this topic, and prepare yourselves to be engaged in a conversation. Although it sounds like this is a one-way conversation, me speaking to you, I very much would love to hear from you, and your engagement in this is an important component to what I'm hoping to accomplish today. So. And as soon as you've done so, you feel free to introduce yourself with a simple greeting in the chat box. Yeah, no special gatherings with friends, Elena. That's another good example of a big difference that we've got this Ramadan. So as we get settled in here to this topic, I want to establish one particular verse. It's actually just the beginning of a verse that I have found to be very interesting. In fact, it's something that my son reminded us of this morning, last night, sorry, when we were praying Taraweeh at home as a family. And he quoted this particular verse in Arabic. It's Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, La yukallifu Allahu nafsan illa wus'aha. Allah does not place a burden on a person or on a soul greater than it has the strength to bear. And that's a tremendous verse. I find it very comforting in times of distress, in times of hardship. It certainly helps us. And while it may serve as a comfort, certainly for many people who are going through hardships now, I want to present it in a different angle, which is that when we are given a hardship, we are also given the capacity to rise to that hardship. Another way of saying this is in the context of COVID-19 or Ramadan during COVID-19, we are being presented with a new challenge. And in being presented with that new challenge, know that Allah has also blessed us with the strength to address that challenge. Meaning, we now have to rise up and discover, what does this new context mean for us? And how are we now going to be improved people, or more creative people, or more innovative when it comes to the ways in which we can engage the Ramadan? And particularly, the topic that I wanted to slice out of that is more creative in the ways that we can be generous during Ramadan. I think one of the things that I would say we miss the most during Ramadan is the opportunities to be generous. And I think that's something that I know I miss. I know many people do miss as well. And while the gatherings are something that I look forward to tremendously, I also look forward to the opportunities to be generous with others, and to be kind with others, and to do kind acts. And while that's certainly a behavior that we should be practicing year round, I think in Ramadan it becomes uh, uh, more significant of something that's lacking or something that's missing, that we want to make sure we incorporate more fully into um, our celebration of this month. So So my challenge and my invitation really to all of you is to help me in a discussion format here identify ways in which we can be more generous, or ways in which we can be generous during Ramadan, and to do so at a time when we're limited in our movement and we're limited in our ability to interact with other people. So I'm going to present this to you in just a moment. Let me share uh, one other very important verse that often comes up in the Quran in many different parts, where Allah Subhanahu wa Taala say, "الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ," those who believe and do good deeds, or do righteous deeds, and and I like that pairing is always a very interesting coupling that you'll find. It'll often be those who believe and do good deeds. It's rarely just those who do good deeds, and it's rarely just those who believe. And I think Ramadan is that opportunity for us to renew both our belief, but our belief through action, and not just action without belief, but really both. And through that, I invite us to renew our intentions, so that as we reach and seek out opportunities to be generous toward others and kind toward others, and while we seek out opportunities to exercise all of those things that bring in the blessings of Ramadan, including generosity toward others, remember that it comes from a place of faith. It comes from a place of belief. And that while doing good is always good, doing good is enhanced when it's done from a place of belief and a place of faith, in a place where we believe that that this will bring us some level of grace and goodness into our lives and into our souls, and really give us that exceptional goodwill that we seek through those types of actions. So here is my prompt to you. My prompt to you, and again, if you've got someone next to you, by all means, please discuss with the person next to you, and respond to the following question. Um, how can we be generous toward others, although we are restricted in our movements during COVID-19? So, how can we be generous with others within the context of these restrictions that we have in terms of movement and interacting with others? So, let me see what kind of ideas fly in there. And as ideas come through, I'll pepper them with some of my own as well. And in the meantime, I want to welcome Samina and Abdul Qadir and Elena. Thank you. And Tusif and AM and Saima, thank you for engaging in the discussion online here. That's fine, Samina. She mentioned that she doesn't have anybody to discuss with next to her. That's fine. But you're absolutely welcome to just engage directly with me. Pretend we're chatting online. It's I'd like this to feel like as much of a conversation amongst us as if we were talking through the camera. Even though I can't hear you, but I can certainly read your comments. So we've got my first response comes here from AM. Online donations, absolutely, and of course, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge our hosts today, the Islamic Center of Irvine, which is certainly engaged in a very deliberate campaign to encourage people to remember that while you may go to the masjid every Friday and put a little something in the donation box, or maybe every night during Tarawih you may be putting something in the donation box, remember that that invitation is not there for you in the real sense, but it's certainly there for you in the virtual sense. So please take that opportunity to make online donations to your local masajid, particularly the Islamic Center of Irvine, who's hosting this wonderful opportunity today. Being patient, flexible, kind, and engage in online discussions. I like this one, exactly. Saima, I appreciate that response. It certainly is a good example of what I'm asking of you. I'm asking you to be generous with your own knowledge. You have ideas, you have creative ways that you can be generous. Share that with the rest of us, and allow me to bring that out into others who are either watching with us live or who will be watching this recording later. Sharing dua or supplications over Facebook and text, that's also a very wonderful thing to do. Absolutely. Reaching out to others is something that I thought of, in preparing for this talk. The idea that we should be reaching out to other people that we may not typically be reaching out to, either through phone calls, just sending, just best wishes and prayers for others, and hoping things are well, checking in with them if you've heard they were ill or have any other kind of issue in their life. Taking that time that we have at home to really connect with people through all the other mediums that we have, whether that be texting, messaging. There's of course video conferencing like this as well, or even just using the phone to do something we rarely realize it can do, which is make a phone call. Um, let's see, I've got another one here. We've got Venmo and we should use it to donate, and and keep the house running and the house of Allah running, I assume is what we're saying there. So thank you, Sadaf, for that one. Being supportive online, absolutely. Um, I think it comes as no surprise that a lot of people use social media as a means to harm, and I think there are certainly plenty who also use it as a means to heal and as a means to spread love and compassion and best wishes for people. So I encourage you, definitely that would be if you are one who likes to be on social media. Um, Make your presence there a positive one. Be a beacon of light. Be a source of joy and relief for people who may be suffering and who would appreciate that generous compassion from you. All right, so please keep your ideas flowing in the chat box. I'll share some of the other ones that I've come up with here. Um, one of the things that is often reminded to us by the Prophet ﷺ is the importance of our neighbors and kindness to our neighbors. And of course, the hadith are numerous, and I won't recite all of them to you here, but I think it's sufficient enough to say that we have an obligation to our neighbors, be they Muslim or otherwise. And I think one idea that I've heard many do, and I've tried to practice this myself as well, is to reach out to neighbors, even if it's just a text message, even if it's just talking over the fence, or the wall, or however it is you see your neighbor, and just genuinely asking, "Are you okay? How are you?" If you are going to the market, maybe sending a message and asking, "Is there something I can get you while I'm there?" The other day, I was at one Costco and my neighbor was at another Costco, and we were texting each other and we were comparing products, right? "Oh, my Costco's got toilet paper. Can you get me some?" "Okay, great." "And mine doesn't have this. Can you get me some of that?" And so, we've really turned it into quite an adventure. And I think this experience has given opportunities for us to reach out to our neighbors in ways we perhaps never thought to, as much as we now can. Um, you can, of course, reach out to your neighbors not only in offering to get them something if you're happening to go into the market, but you could support your neighbors by sharing food with them. And I think that's something that can be done. Of course, use social distancing and all the necessary precautions to prevent any other kinds of infections. But I think um, you may not be able to go to your friends' houses that are across town or far away, or even family members that are far away, but there's no reason why you can't share a tray of food with your neighbor and still enjoy the blessings of what that means for us during Ramadan, which is sharing food with others. There's a few others that have come in here. Um, Forgiving anyone from the heart, let go and praying for all the believers. Absolutely. So this is something from Tusif. Sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, but that's a great suggestion. Forgiveness is a form of generosity, and thinking about what may be lingering in your heart towards someone else, and taking that opportunity, even if you don't have to say it to the individual, just within yourself, to let that go, to release. Whatever we may holding against another individual, be that a friend or acquaintance, it could even be a family member. Um, and we hear numerous stories of family members who reconciled during Ramadan, and that's certainly a tremendous thing. So um, that hasn't gone away just because of COVID-19. The opportunities to let go of old wrongs and forgive for those who may have harmed us. I notice a number of people have joined us since I started. I just wanted to articulate what I'm trying to accomplish through today's talk. Is I'd like to encourage those of you who are listening to participate in this conversation. And so pull somebody who may be in the home with you to participate in my prompts and the questions that I'm asking, and respond in the chat box. Um, so for those of you who are joining us a little later now, the prompt is, what are ways that we can be generous despite being at home or limited in our movement and our ability to move out? So this being the month of Ramadan, a time for us to increase our acts of generosity, I'd love to hear some ideas from you as I share some of my own as well. And as you put them in the chat box, I'll definitely be sharing them with everyone as well. Um, Another opportunity, and this was mentioned earlier, was we can be generous to our family members or whoever it is we're quarantined with. Um, so take advantage of the opportunity. If you have younger siblings or older siblings, I assume there are people of a variety of ages who will be watching this. Maybe this is an opportunity to be extra kind in ways that maybe you haven't been before to your sibling. And And I recognize that that's a particularly high achievement in this context, because sometimes when we're cooped up with the same people for a long time, it gets harder and harder to be generous with them and to be kind to them. But I remind you of the verse that I started off with. God does not place a burden on us greater than we have the strength to bear. And if God has locked you up with somebody who you often find annoying, remember that that individual is being put there as an opportunity by God for you to show generosity and kindness, even in the most difficult of circumstances. We were thinking of the perfect storm here is, we're hungry, we're thirsty, we're cooped up with the same person all day and all night, um, and yet we still need to be extra generous to them. I can't imagine a greater reward than during normal times, than in engaging in opportunities to be kind to our family members, be they siblings who typically may be getting on our nerves or otherwise. Um, I've got another suggestion here, calling extended families overseas, those who we may not speak to. We probably have a little bit of extra time on our hands, and this is probably not a bad idea to reach out to them in whatever means is beneficial. You could certainly call them, you could text them, message them, email them even. There's a lot of different ways we can reach out to family members, both domestic and overseas, that we may not always connect with. Another activity that I've seen some people do is they write cards, or they prepare care packages. In fact, I was very touched earlier today by a friend who drove by, and he had his kids with him in the back seat, and they came right up to the door. They put a little care package on our front step, rang the doorbell, and I knew it was coming, and so I was very excited when I heard the doorbell. So I opened the door. I knew I wouldn't see anybody at the door, but fortunately, I did see them out on the street, and I was able to kind of wave hello and have a brief conversation. And that's happened a couple of times with some other friends, either on the receiving end or the giving end, where, keeping a very safe distance, either from the car or even just at the end of the driveway or the walkway, bottom of the stairs, top of the stairs. There's plenty of ways that we can still see one another, but from a safe distance, and we can still have a very positive pretense to seeing one another, which would be dropping off some sort of a care package. Um, we've had a couple families bring dates, which is wonderful. We'll probably have enough dates to last us through the next few Ramadans, inshallah. And then the package that came today had some candy in it and some baked goods. So, anything you can do is great, even if it's just a nice card. Yes, you can put it in the mail, but there's that extra nice touch to just getting in the car, gets you out of the house for a little bit, but still with a safe context. And then you just run up to a door and you drop it off. People can be very, very very appreciative of those opportunities. So care packages, cards, and then of course you could mail cards as well. But certainly preparing those kinds of things can be very helpful. Um, I'll share with you an example from my own life. W- there's a uh, I work for a school district, and one of the things that we're doing for students is we're preparing instructional packets. And some of you may have gotten so these instructional packets are for students who don't have access to the internet, or they don't have very good internet, and so it's difficult for them to participate in online learning, or it's difficult for them to access a website where they can download these instructional packets. And so we're actually putting them in the mail. It's such a large undertaking that we've asked for some of our employees to come to our warehouse, pick up these packets, put them in envelopes with a mailing label, and then bring them back to the warehouse where they get processed and put in the mail. And I found an overwhelming number of my coworkers um, really wanting that opportunity. They as soon as they heard that this was something that we were doing, they said, can I do it more than once? Can I come to, after dropping off, can I pick up more? And they'll take them home and they'll do them as a family. And I think it really occurred to me just how thoughtful the act of doing this was when I heard from a coworker of mine whose son had received the package, and she knew that we were preparing them. And I think for her, it really touched her heart that this package of instructional material was sent home to her son, and she knew that it was prepared in someone else's home. This idea of connecting hearts through ways that we often don't think is possible is really a beautiful experience. So I encourage you to not underestimate the beauty and wonder of putting something in a box or putting something in an envelope, from your heart, um, and then putting it into someone else's home and into their heart. And I think that is a beautiful act of generosity that I believe this context has provided us that we otherwise don't think of very often, because we think of, oh, I'm just going to go to the masjid and see people. Well, we're not going to do that anymore. And so now it gives us these opportunities to heighten our senses in areas that we don't always think about. So that's something I'd like to encourage. Okay, so we've got a few more suggestions here. This is a suggestion from a 7-year-old. Helping my parents and cleaning my room. That is a fantastic suggestion. In fact, I would even suggest for children of all ages, adults of all ages. Um, so that's very good. Let's see here. Oh, another thing I heard of is, I guess what you would call people doing like parades. If there's some reason to celebrate a friend or a loved one, what I've often seen is people will come by in their cars, and they'll honk and they'll wave from the car. They'll let them know they're coming, and the person will stand on their driveway or their walkway and out in front of their house as people kind of parade by and give them well wishes, whether it be for a birthday or for any other reason. And I think those are all wonderful things that can be done. Um, it can be done for a family member that simply misses, their grandchildren. If you simply drive by frequently, I think that's a wonderful, very generous thing to do, and it would certainly make someone's day. Um, Another thing that I've seen people in my neighborhood do is they've given gifts to first responders, and they've taken this as an opportunity to thank our first responders, whether those be our nurses, our doctors, our emergency workers. Um, and one example that I've heard of is kind of a way to do two good things at once is, obviously, as we know, there are many businesses, small businesses that are really struggling. And one example of a business that isn't getting as much traffic as it probably normally does would be your local donut shop or your local bagel shop or something like that. One of those small places that typically gets a nice, crowd and a flow of people throughout the morning and throughout the day, but now obviously their business is being affected by all of this. So in addition to, of course, frequenting these stores, what I saw one person do is they'll go to the donut shop as they're closing, and they'll buy any remaining donuts they have left over, and they'll take them to a nearby hospital or first responder station, whether it be a police station, fire station, etc. Um, and they'll donate that to our first responders and to our nurses and our doctors. And I always think that's a sweet gesture as well, an opportunity to be generous, particularly in the time of Ramadan when we're looking for ways to be generous. That was one that I thought was wonderful. Um, Another one that to be quite honest, I haven't heard very much of this happening, but I think it should happen. One of the things that we know of in our tradition is very, very much encouraged is the visiting of the sick, which of course in this context we cannot do. But what I think we can do is virtual visits with the sick, and I think that there should be ways that we can reach out to either through hospitals and through their chaplains, and you can say, listen, can I speak with your chaplain at your hospital? And you would say, and once you get in touch with that chaplain, have a conversation with them over the phone and say, I'd really like there to be a way for me to visit patients virtually, and see what comes out of that conversation. The chaplain may be able to, bring you in on an iPad or some other kind of device, and as the chaplain comes in to visit, there's another person there as well who's simply there to say hello. I'd love to see how you're doing and sit and chat. And maybe there's a way that that technology can be even left in the room, in the same way that you might be if you were to come visit as well. So I encourage you to reach out to your hospitals and ask, is there a way for us to engage in virtual visitations and see what can be set up? This is another one I see here. It says we can donate at Frontline Food website for nurses in the ER. So I guess that's a website that I'm not familiar with called Frontline Food. I certainly can't endorse it, but I would encourage you to look into it. But any opportunity to support our hospital workers. And keep in mind, when we talk about hospital workers, we're not only talking about nurses and doctors. There are a number of other people who are showing up to work at a hospital every day and making sure that those operations are running smoothly. There's custodial, there's food service, um, and administrative services. So all of these are super, super important. I, of course, gave the example of chaplains as well. and I know that they're reporting to work as usual, and we appreciate that very much. And in general, the healthcare industry is very broad, and there's a lot of people that are working very, very hard to support us through this crisis. And this is a wonderful opportunity for us to extend our generosity to them, particularly in this month of Ramadan. All right. More ideas from my audience. If you guys can throw in some more thoughts and ideas, that would be great. One other group that we can be thankful to and express some level of generosity to are our other essential employees. So our grocery store employees, and again, we're talking about the people that stock our shelves as well as those who we check out from. Um, uh, the other day, I saw an Amazon employee, and delivering a package, and it kind of struck me. I'm like, this individual is working. This individual is out there making sure that those of us who don't want to be out or can't be out um, still get the products that we need to be able to function normally and to kind of maintain some level of normalcy for the rest of us. And I was very appreciative just to see this individual, even though I'm aware of them, seeing them was an occasion for me to say thank you and just to really check in on him and see how are you, how's your family doing, are you taking care of yourself, you feeling well, thank you so much, for continuing to do the work that you're doing. And I recognize, and this leads to another group of people that I think is important for us to think about during this time. um, uh, what I recognize about this particular employee and many others is they don't really have much of a choice. They need to work because if they don't, they'll either not get paid, and uh, that could, of course, adversely affect any of us. Um, I think that this is a moment for those of us who still have employment, or at least still have some sort of a stable income, to be exceptionally grateful and to take this month as an opportunity to be grateful to God and show that gratitude through generosity to others, through kindness to others, sharing in that wealth as much as we can. Um, I know of certain people who we may typically get, either washing our cars or cleaning our homes or servicing us in other ways, um, perhaps even gardeners. It's really important that we think about them and we think about the ways that their income isn't affected by this, and to see ways that we can be generous. Even though there may be a reduction in service or a reduction in in what they're providing to us, that shouldn't reduce our generosity or our acknowledgement of them and their own needs. Um, so I want to invite you to think of that as well as opportunities. Um, there are millions of Americans who are filing unemployment, who are out of work. Um, in some cases, they could work, but they can't because they're vulnerable medically, or they live with someone who is vulnerable medically, and it's just not safe for them to come to work because while they may be able to sustain something, that may not be the case for others. I heard from a coworker at work that there was a first responder in another city. Um, Both this first responder and their spouse also works in a first response. I think one was fire and one was police, and sadly, they brought COVID home to their daughter, and she did not survive. And that's just a terrible story, and it makes me think of the many people out there who are always deserving of our generosity. But in this case in particular, I do think that Ramadan is coming at just the right time to remind us that we should be at the forefront of generous acts toward people. Ramadan reminds us always be kind, always be generous, and here is that invitation from Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, where while we can be frustrated that we can't pray Tarawih at the masjid or we can't go to our friends and have our our home visits and share our meals, we can certainly do a lot of the other things that Ramadan reminds us is critical. And the one topic for today that I wanted to bring tremendous emphasis on is the need for us to be generous and to really scratch our heads and dig deep and find ways that we can be generous, because that's what's going to get us through this, and that's what's going to get our country through this. It's what's going to get the world through this. It's the kindness of one person to the other, the kindness of large groups of people to people who really, really need help and support. Um, We've of course talked about donating money, but I'd be remiss if I didn't remind you that that is certainly something that is needed at this point. Um, our religious organizations, our masajid, our schools, they continue to need our financial support. And just because we aren't seeing them and interacting with them, it doesn't mean that they don't have expenses that need to be maintained. And as you can see, an organization like the Islamic Center of Irvine, as well as many of our other Muslim organizations, are really making earnest efforts to maintain access to spiritual and religious guidance for all of us. Um, I thank them very much, Brother Amin and Sayed Zia, for helping set this up, Sheikh Atif for really being passionate in his pursuit of these opportunities for us in the community. He continues these things for all of us, and I thank him very much for that. Um, I also want to thank my son Zaid for both the inspirational verse that I started us off with, as well as this amazing lighting that you'll notice here. My son Zaid is a budding cinematographer, inshallah. So we always try to use his skills when the opportunity suits itself like this. I do hope that you've all walked out of here with something. If you could just take a moment and you could certainly throw it in the chat box, but or at least talk to the person next to you and think, you know, from sitting here for the time that I've been here, I've come up with the following ways that I'm going to be generous during Ramadan. And if you'd share them in the chat box, that would be great for me. It would certainly serve as great feedback. Um, as a teacher, I always want to know, am I making a difference? Has this made an impact? And I can certainly look at the number of likes, but that doesn't do the same as actually hearing it here. Um, Thank you very much. Yeah, I'll introduce myself one more time for those of you who may have joined us late. My name is Omar Izzeddin, and it's been a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Sheikh Atif, and thank you to many others who've helped make this possible. Again, if you've gotten something beneficial out of today, I thank you for your engagement and your participation. Um, and I look forward to reconnecting with those of you who I know are in the chat box now once we have that opportunity in person. But in the meantime, we can certainly connect virtually and take these opportunities to express and show love and generosity toward one another through uh, through a virtual space just as much. I pray that Allah continue to protect and nourish and sustain our community, that He bring health and wellness to those who are ill, that He bring mercy to those who are dying or who've died, and that He continue to give us the guidance and the wisdom to make it through this challenge, both the challenge of this pandemic and the challenge of enjoying Ramadan and taking everything and more than we ever have before, despite the new context. I am confident that we will come out of this better and stronger and smarter, and inshallah more spiritual, because we're going to find new ways to connect with Allah. We're going to find new ways to find the blessings of Ramadan that we haven't had to in the past. In many ways, it's similar to the individual who has gone blind but whose hearing has been enhanced. In this case, COVID has taken away one of our faculties that enable us to engage with Ramadan, and inshallah, may that only enhance the other faculties, such as praying at home or connecting more with our families, and taking those opportunities that have been put in front of us and giving us the opportunities to rise to the challenge that has been placed before us. Because as we know, and as I began, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah does not place a burden on us greater than we have the strength to bear. May Allah continue to give us that strength and the awareness of the strength that He has given us to rise to this challenge and all of those that shall be put before us. Jazakallah khair. May God reward all of you for your participation today, and those of you who may listen thereafter, as well as those who've helped put all of this together. Have a wonderful evening, Ramadan Mubarak, and save me some dessert.